10 years ago, everything seemed to be falling perfectly into place. I was 24, fresh out of college, and engaged to Emma, the woman I thought I would spend the rest of my life with. We were supposed to be partners in everything: plans, dreams, a future. We'd spent so much time imagining our lives together, building a future we were both excited for. Our relationship felt solid, a beautiful foundation for the life we were about to build. I had never been more certain about anything in my life. Then, without any warning, it all came crashing down. One morning, after I returned from a quick meeting, I found a letter waiting for me on the kitchen table. I thought it was just a casual note from Emma, something sweet or perhaps about the wedding plans we'd been discussing. But when I opened it, the words shattered me. It wasn't the love letter I had been expecting. It wasn't even a farewell I could process. It was cold, distant, and final. Emma was leaving me. No explanation, no reasoning. Just a letter, a few words that said everything was over. She was leaving, and I wasn't even going to have the chance to understand why. I sat there, reading the letter over and over, trying to make sense of it. I thought, maybe I was reading it wrong, but the truth was right there in front of me. She was gone, and I hadn't even gotten a chance to fight for us. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, a misunderstanding, but the hurt in my chest told me otherwise. I spent the next few days in a daze, a mixture of confusion, hurt, and disbelief. Our apartment felt so empty, so silent without her. I couldn't believe that the woman who had been my everything, the person I'd planned to build my future with, was suddenly just gone. The days turned into weeks, then months. I did what I could to move on, focusing on work, burying myself in the projects at Wilson and McKay Architects, keeping busy so I wouldn't think too much. But Emma's absence was a constant ache in the back of my mind. Then one day, out of nowhere, I received an invitation for a new project. It was a luxury apartment complex in the heart of the city. I had a client meeting scheduled for 2 p.m. that day, but when my assistant, Kate, informed me that the client had arrived early, I wasn't expecting anything that would stir my emotions. I figured it would be like any other meeting, talking about square footage and budgets, keeping it professional. At least that was what I told myself. I glanced at my watch, noticing it was only 1:30, but I didn't mind. Early clients were usually eager, and that usually made for smoother projects. Kate handed me the client's details, and I prepared myself for yet another business meeting. "Rachel Turner," she said. "She's interested in designing a high-rise in the city center." Rachel Turner? I didn't recognize the name. Probably another wealthy client with grand ideas about a luxury space. I'd handled plenty of those, and I was ready to get to work. When the door to my office opened, I wasn't prepared for what came through it. My heart skipped a beat as I saw her. It wasn't Rachel Turner. It was Emma. Standing there in the doorway, just as beautiful as I remembered, but with an air of maturity that felt like a punch to the gut. My breath caught in my chest. How was she here? How was this even possible? The last time I had seen her, she was the girl who left me behind. The girl who tore my world apart with nothing more than a cold letter. And yet, here she was, not as the woman I had once known, but as someone else entirely. Someone who looked like she'd built a new life, a new version of herself. "Hello, Dylan," she said softly, her voice carrying a strange mix of warmth and hesitation, as if testing the waters, wondering whether the past could ever be forgiven. The words caught in my throat. "Emma?" It came out more as a whisper than anything else. "What are you doing here?" Her eyes met mine, and for a moment it felt like no time had passed. But everything was different now. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know whether to be angry or relieved, hurt or hopeful. Everything I thought I knew about her, about us, was suddenly in question again. I stood there, frozen, unable to fully process what was happening. Emma, standing in front of me, looked almost the same as the girl I once knew, but the woman in front of me now was someone I didn't recognize. She was different, more confident, more polished. Her hair was shorter, neatly framing her face, and there was a maturity about her that made my heart ache even more. Her eyes, though, were still the same deep brown, the ones I had always gotten lost in. They had once been filled with love for me, and now they seemed to hold 1,000 unspoken words. "Emma," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't help myself. I had to ask, even though I already knew the answer. What are you doing here? Her gaze softened, but there was still that professional distance between us. I need an architect, she said, her voice calm, almost too calm. She stepped into my office, and I automatically gestured for her to take a seat. But as she walked past me, I felt a strange weight in my chest, something heavy that had been dormant for so long, but now rushed back with a force I wasn't prepared for. I watched her as she moved, her every step reminding me of the way we used to be, the way we used to laugh and plan our futures together. I'm here because your firm was highly recommended, she continued, sitting down across from me. There was something about her tone, a subtle hint of uncertainty, that made my heart twist. She was here for business, but I couldn't help but feel like there was so much more left unspoken between us. I cleared my throat, trying to focus on the task at hand. Of course, I can help. Let's go over the details of the project. I tried to sound professional, but my mind was racing, and my emotions were all over the place. I had spent years trying to bury the memory of her, and now here she was, right in front of me, as if nothing had changed, as if she hadn't walked away without a word all those years ago. I couldn't help but notice how effortlessly she carried herself now, as though the time apart had allowed her to grow into someone far removed from the girl I had once known. She was more put together, more refined, and it made me feel out of place. I didn't know how to bridge the gap between the past and the present. I didn't know how to talk to her like we were just two adults discussing a project, like we hadn't shared a deep, painful history. Rachel Turner, I said, trying to snap myself back to reality. I didn't realize you had changed your name. Emma Hart was my maiden name, she replied, her voice steady. I'm married now to someone else. The words hit me like a slap. Married. Of course she was. It had been 10 years, and I was naive to think she had stayed single, that somehow we could just pick up where we left off. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to remain composed. Right, I said, though the word tasted bitter in my mouth. Congratulations. Thank you, she said quietly. But there was something in the way she said it, something in her eyes that told me she wasn't as sure as she sounded. And you? I saw the ring, she added. 5 years, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. Her name's Lily. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken words, the weight of everything we hadn't said to each other in the years we'd been apart, hanging heavily in the room. My assistant, Kate, seemed to sense the tension and quietly closed the door behind her, leaving us alone. Emma shifted in her seat, and for a moment it felt like the old Emma, the one I used to know, was back. But there was also a distance, something between us that hadn't been there before. I guess this was a mistake, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't mean to make things complicated. No, I said quickly, almost too quickly. I didn't want her to leave again, not without an explanation, not without a chance to understand what had really happened. I mean, if you need an architect, I'm happy to help. We can keep this professional. But as I said the words, I realized how empty they sounded. There was nothing professional about this. Nothing detached about the flood of memories rushing back. The late nights we spent planning our future, the way she'd looked at me, the way she left without a word. All of it was here, in this room, as if time hadn't passed at all. She nodded slowly, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. She wasn't sure how to handle this either. Let's talk about the building, she said, her voice softer now, almost hesitant. She pulled a folder from her bag and placed it on the table between us, but we both knew we weren't talking about blueprints anymore. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur. We discussed square footage, floor plans, and design concepts, but my mind was miles away. My thoughts kept circling back to the same question. Why had she left? Why hadn't she fought for us? And why had she written that letter, the one that I had held onto for so long, saying she was leaving without any explanation? As she spoke, I heard her voice, but it felt distant, like I was hearing her through a tunnel. I wanted to ask her everything, about the letter, about her marriage, about why she had left without a word. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I focused on the project, focused on the task at hand. The lot is 3 acres, she said, snapping me out of my thoughts. I want something modern, but with a homey feel. A place where what? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. A place where a family could grow, she finished, her voice catching slightly. Family. My heart skipped a beat. The pain from all those years ago surged forward again. She was married, trying to have kids with someone else. She had moved on, and I was still here, stuck in the past. Is this for you and your husband? I asked before I could stop myself. She hesitated, her eyes glancing down for a moment before meeting mine again. We're trying to have kids, she said, her voice trembling. But it hasn't been easy. I didn't know what to say. All these years, and she was still carrying the same weight I had been carrying. The conversation drifted back to the project, but my mind was still tangled in the past, spinning in circles around the unanswered questions. It felt surreal, sitting across from Emma, hearing her talk about square footage and designs, when all I could think about was why she had left me, why she never showed up at the station, why the woman who had promised me forever had walked away without so much as a word. Every word she said about the project, every design element she brought up, felt like a distant echo as my thoughts kept returning to that day. The pain from 10 years ago was suddenly fresh, as if it had never left. I could tell she was struggling with this too, her eyes betraying the calm facade she had built over the years. She wasn't the same carefree woman I had fallen in love with. She had changed, and I had changed too. The years apart had hardened something in me. I had buried my emotions so deep that I hadn't realized how much I still felt until this moment. It felt like all the unresolved grief was coming to the surface, and I was struggling to keep it together. I tried to focus on the project, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling in my chest. Dylan, she said suddenly, her voice cracking just slightly. It was the first time she'd said my name with that much emotion, and it made my heart ache. She leaned forward, a tentative look in her eyes as she finally broke the silence between us. I have to ask you something. Why didn't you respond to my letter? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I froze, my mind blanking for a moment. What letter? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I knew exactly what she was talking about, but I couldn't wrap my mind around it. The letter I left for you, she said softly, almost as if she were afraid of how I might respond. The one asking you to meet me at the train station. The one where I told you that I loved you, and if you wanted a life with me, I was waiting for you at 6 p.m. The words felt like a tidal wave crashing into me. I was drowning in confusion, in the weight of everything that had gone wrong. I had spent 10 years carrying the pain of that letter, the one that I thought she had written, the one that claimed she was leaving, that our relationship had been a mistake. It had haunted me, and I never let go of it, convinced that Emma had abandoned me. But now, hearing her words, everything I had believed was falling apart. I felt my throat tighten as the truth began to sink in. Emma, what are you talking about? I asked, my voice shaking. I still have the letter. It said you were leaving. It said it was over. Her face drained of color, and I saw the anguish in her eyes. No, Dylan, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I never wrote anything like that. I was waiting for you at the station. I waited for hours, Dylan, 4 hours. I thought you were coming. I thought you would fight for us. Her words felt like a knife to my chest. 4 hours. She had waited for me, and I hadn't shown up. I had never known. The truth was crashing in, and I felt my world spinning out of control. I don't understand, I said, my voice barely audible. How could this happen? Why would someone make us believe that? I never went anywhere, she continued, her voice thick with emotion. I stayed, I waited, and you never came. And then you disappeared. I thought you had given up on me. My heart was breaking as I tried to piece together what had happened. I thought she had left me. I thought she didn't want me anymore. But now I was hearing that she had stayed, that she had been there, waiting for me to show up. And I hadn't. A wave of guilt washed over me as I remembered the pain of those first few months after she left. I had been so sure that she had moved on, that I had been abandoned. The letter I held in my hands, the one that had haunted me for years, was a lie. It wasn't her handwriting. It wasn't her words. Someone switched our letters, I said slowly, the realization sinking in. But why? Who would do this? She hesitated, looking down at her hands. When she looked up at me again, her eyes were full of anger and regret. I think it was Michael, she said quietly. Your roommate. He knew we were close, and he wanted me. He was jealous. He saw what we had, and he wanted to destroy it. The pieces were finally falling into place. Michael had been the one to interfere in our lives, the one who had taken away everything that mattered to me. He had sabotaged our love out of jealousy. I felt a cold, bitter rage rising in my chest as I thought about the betrayal. Michael had been the one to cause all this pain. And now, 10 years later, we were both left to pick up the pieces of our broken lives. "I can't believe this," I muttered, my voice shaking. "How could he do this to us?" "I don't know," Emma said softly, her face pale. "I never understood why he would do that, but I know it ruined everything. We lost 10 years because of his jealousy." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. 10 years. 10 years of pain, of grief, of believing that Emma had abandoned me. All of it had been a lie. It was all so much to process. So much time lost. "Why didn't you try to find me?" she asked softly, almost as if she were asking herself. "Why didn't you come after me when you didn't hear from me?" The question hung in the air, and I had no answer. Maybe I had been too proud. Maybe I had convinced myself that if she had left me, there was no point in trying. But now, in this moment, I realized how much time we had lost, how much pain we had both carried because of a lie. "I should have," I said quietly. "I should have fought for us." We sat there in silence, both of us drowning in the reality of what had been taken from us. What we could have had if the truth had come out sooner. But now, with the truth in front of us, all we could do was face the years that had been stolen and wonder what might have been. The silence between us felt heavy, like a weight pressing down on both of us, suffocating the space in the room. I didn't know what to say next, and neither did Emma. Everything we had thought we knew was now a lie. The years of heartache, the pain of believing we had been abandoned, gone in an instant, replaced by the staggering truth that our love had been sabotaged, that we had both been victims of someone else's jealousy. 10 years of our lives, stolen by a petty act of manipulation, and I was left wondering where we would go from here. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. The betrayal by Michael was something I could barely wrap my mind around. I had always trusted him, considered him a friend, and yet he had turned out to be the person who had destroyed the most important thing in my life. I thought about how naive I had been, how easily I had let that letter dictate my actions, how I had never questioned what had happened. "Michael," I whispered, my voice breaking, "I can't believe he did this. He knew how much I loved you. How could he?" Emma didn't answer right away. Her eyes were filled with the same sadness I felt. She had been through her own turmoil, waiting for me at the station, thinking I didn't love her enough to show up. She had suffered just as much as I had, and now we were left with the ruins of what could have been. "I don't know," she finally said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't understand why he would do that, but he did, and we were both hurt because of it." I looked at her, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes that I had missed all these years. The woman sitting across from me now wasn't the same person I had known before. She had been changed by the time we had lost, by the way things had turned out. But there was still something familiar in her, something that made my heart ache for the life we might have had. "I wish I had known," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I wish I had known you were waiting for me. I would have come." "I know," she said quietly. "I know you would have. But by the time I realized you weren't coming, it was too late. I thought I had lost you forever." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I had thought the same thing for 10 years. I had thought she had left me without a word, without a second thought. I had never once considered the possibility that she was the one who had been left in the dark, that she had waited for me to come and fight for us. We sat there in silence for a while, both of us lost in our thoughts, the weight of the past pressing down on us. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had let so much slip away, that there was so much we could have had if I had just known the truth. But there was no way to go back, no way to fix the years that had been lost. "I don't know what to do with this," I said finally, breaking the silence. "I don't know what to do with all this time we've lost. Can we even fix it?" Emma looked at me, her eyes softening. "I don't know," she said. "I don't know if we can ever go back to what we had, or if we should, but I do know that I can't keep living with the regret of never knowing the truth. We've both been living with that pain for far too long." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle in my chest. She was right. We couldn't change the past, but we could at least confront it, understand what had happened, and maybe, just maybe, begin to heal. "Do you ever wonder," Emma said, her voice quiet, "what our lives would have been like if we hadn't lost those 10 years? The question caught me off guard, but it was the one I had been asking myself ever since she walked into my office. I closed my eyes for a moment, imagining a different reality, one where we had both chosen to fight for each other, where Michael's interference hadn't ripped us apart. I imagined a future where we had built a life together, one that was full of love and laughter, without the shadow of betrayal hanging over us. "I think about it all the time," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. "What we could have had, what we still could have. But the truth was, we couldn't undo the past. We couldn't erase the hurt and the lost years. All we had now was the present and the possibility, however uncertain, of a future together. And that, at least, was a start. Maybe we can't go back," I said quietly, looking at her with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. "But we can move forward. We can start over. And this time, we'll do it right." Emma's eyes softened, a small, light, hesitant smile tugging at her lips. "Maybe we can," she whispered. And for the first time in a decade, I felt a flicker of hope, like maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for us after all. The next few days felt like a blur, a mixture of emotions I couldn't quite untangle. What was I supposed to do now? What was the right thing to do? We had talked, we had faced the truth, and yet I still couldn't shake the uncertainty that hung in the air. It was like standing at the edge of something massive, a precipice I had been too afraid to approach for years. Now that I was standing here, looking into the abyss of everything that had been stolen from us, I wasn't sure if I could take the leap into the unknown. I kept replaying our conversation over and over in my mind. The truth had come crashing down, but I still couldn't fully grasp its weight. Michael's betrayal had torn our lives apart. And Emma, she had waited for me at that station for 4 hours, thinking I didn't love her enough to show up. All those years, all that pain, all that loss, it could have been avoided if we had just known the truth. But the truth had remained hidden, buried under layers of lies, assumptions, and misunderstandings. Now it was too late to go back, to fix what had been broken. But could we start over? Could we rebuild what was lost? I kept thinking about what Emma had said, about how we couldn't go back to what we had, but we could move forward. It felt like a small but significant hope, a flicker in the darkness. I had spent so many years holding on to the past, clinging to the hurt, to the belief that she had abandoned me. And maybe she had, in a way. But now I knew the truth. She had been waiting for me, the whole time, just like I had been waiting for her. We had both been stuck in this painful loop, unable to move forward because of a lie. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew I didn't want to live in the past anymore. I couldn't keep going through life with that same bitter feeling, the resentment that had kept me from fully moving on. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine when it wasn't, and I certainly couldn't keep avoiding the one person who had once meant everything to me. I had to see Emma again, so I called her. I wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do, or if I was just trying to undo years of mistakes in one impulsive move, but I knew I had to. I had to speak to her, to figure out where we stood, if we even stood anywhere at all. "Dylan," she said when she answered, her voice calm but soft, as if she was waiting for me to explain myself. "I need to talk," I said, my throat tight. "Can we meet again? I don't know where this goes, but I don't want to leave things like this. I don't want to leave it with just the hurt." "I don't either," she replied quietly. "Where do you want to meet?" We decided on a small cafe on the edge of the city, a quiet place where we wouldn't be interrupted. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting at a table by the window, staring out at the rain as if lost in thought. She hadn't seen me yet, but I saw her, saw the woman who had once been my whole world. She was still beautiful, still the same Emma in so many ways, but she was also different. The years had changed her. The pain had changed her. I approached the table, and she looked up at me, a tentative smile forming on her lips. It wasn't the smile I remembered, the one that lit up her whole face, but it was a start. "Hi," I said quietly, pulling out the chair across from her. "I know this is all complicated, but I wanted to see you." to talk, to figure out what happens next, if there's even a next. I don't know what happens next either, she said, her voice soft but steady. But I think we both deserve to know. We both deserve to not be haunted by the past anymore. We've carried this weight for so long. Maybe it's time to let it go. Her words were like a breath of fresh air. They hit me harder than I expected. Let it go. Could we really let go of all the pain, all the lost years? Could we forgive each other, or at least forgive ourselves for not knowing the truth sooner? I've been holding on to this anger for so long, I confessed, my voice thick with emotion. I blamed you for leaving. I blamed you for everything. But now I see what happened, and I see what we lost, and I don't know how to fix it. I don't think we can fix it, she said gently. But maybe we can rebuild. Maybe we don't need to fix everything. Just move forward from here. Maybe that's enough. I nodded, feeling the tears sting behind my eyes. I had spent 10 years carrying this weight of anger and grief, and now, all of a sudden, it was starting to feel like I could let it go. Like I could finally breathe again. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about everything. The past, the hurt, the confusion, and finally, the possibility of a future. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was starting to understand what Emma and I had been through, what we had lost, and what we might still have a chance at. When we parted ways that day, it wasn't with a promise, but with a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe we could move forward together, or maybe we would have to go our separate ways. But at least we were no longer carrying the weight of the past between us. At least now we had a chance, and that was enough. The days following our conversation felt like a strange kind of limbo, halfway between the past and the future, suspended in this space where nothing was certain, but everything felt different. Emma and I had talked, but we hadn't made any promises. We had spoken about the possibility of moving forward, but the weight of everything we had lost still lingered between us, like a shadow we couldn't quite escape. There was a fragile kind of hope there, yes, but it was also wrapped in the reality that we both had been changed by the years that had passed. We couldn't go back to the way things were. We couldn't just pick up where we left off, no matter how much I wished we could. I spent the following days in a daze, thinking about our time together, about how everything had slipped away so suddenly, and how, even now, I couldn't fully grasp what had happened. I kept telling myself that we couldn't change the past, but that didn't stop the ache in my chest whenever I thought about the lost years. It was like I had to mourn not just the relationship we'd had, but the lives we could have lived, the versions of ourselves we could have become if we hadn't been torn apart. At night, I would lie awake, thinking about Emma, about how she was doing. Was she okay? Was she still carrying the same weight of regret and heartbreak that I had? I knew she had moved on, that she was married now, but the thought of her being with someone else still made my chest tighten. I couldn't deny that I wanted to believe we could have something again, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't rush it. I couldn't expect everything to just fall into place because we had both decided to confront the truth. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild, and I wasn't sure how long it would take for us to get there. The phone call came on a rainy Thursday afternoon, right when I was about to leave for the office. It was Emma. "Dylan, can we talk?" Her voice was soft, hesitant, but there was something in it, something that made my heart skip a beat. "Of course," I replied, already grabbing my jacket, heading toward the door. "What's going on?" "I don't know how to say this," she said, her voice shaky, "but I've been thinking about everything we talked about us, and I think I need to be honest with you." I felt my stomach tighten, unsure of where this conversation was headed. "Emma, you don't have to explain yourself. We've been through a lot already." "I know," she said, "but I think I owe it to you, to both of us, to say it out loud. I've been trying to make sense of everything, and I'm realizing that I haven't been fair to you. I've spent so much time trying to protect myself from the hurt, from everything that happened, but I haven't really let myself be honest with you." There was a long pause on the other end, and I felt the air between us grow thick with the weight of her words. "I've been pretending to be okay, Dylan," she continued, her voice cracking now. "I've been pretending to have moved on, to have a life that makes sense. But the truth is, I've never stopped thinking about you. Not really. And it's been so hard, pretending that what we had didn't matter. My heart was pounding in my chest. Emma? She interrupted me, her words coming faster now. I know it's been years, and I know you've moved on, and I don't want to ruin your life or your marriage, but I can't keep pretending. I can't pretend like I don't still love you, because I do. I always have. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, everything stopped. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I had spent so much time trying to move forward, trying to forget what had happened. But hearing her say those words, hearing her admit what I had been too afraid to acknowledge myself, knocked the wind out of me. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know this is a mess, but I needed to tell you the truth. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I was torn between the years of hurt and the overwhelming realization that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for us after all. But there were so many complications, so many people involved. Could we really try again? Was it fair to our pasts, to the people we had become? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Emma, I said, my voice quiet, but full of the emotion I had been holding back for so long. I don't know what to say. I never stopped loving you either. I don't know what this means, but I don't want to ignore what we had. I don't want to pretend it wasn't real. I don't either, she said softly, but I also don't want to hurt anyone. I've been married for a while now, Dylan, and I can't just walk away from that without thinking about the consequences. I need to figure this out. I know, I said, feeling the weight of her words. We both do. We both fell silent for a long moment, neither of us sure of where we stood. But I realized, in that moment, that we didn't need to have all the answers. We didn't need to know exactly what the future held. What mattered now was that we were finally being honest with each other. We were finally acknowledging what had been buried for too long. I don't know where this goes, I said, my voice steady now, but I'm willing to figure it out. One step at a time, together if you want. I do, she whispered. I really do. The conversation ended with a promise, unspoken but understood, that we would take it slow. We would confront the mess we had made, and we would start the slow process of rebuilding. Neither of us knew what the future would hold, but for the first time in years, I felt like there was a possibility of something more, something real. And that was all I needed to hold on to right now. The weeks that followed that phone call felt like a slow unraveling of everything I thought I knew about my life. Emma and I had agreed to take things slowly, to figure out what it meant to be in each other's lives again. It wasn't easy. It wasn't a fairy tale. We couldn't just pick up where we left off. Not after all that had happened, not after all the time that had passed. But something had shifted between us, something undeniable. We had confronted the past, and we were starting to understand each other in ways we hadn't before. We met several times over the next few weeks. We talked, sometimes for hours, about everything and nothing. It was strange, this new dynamic between us, this mix of familiar intimacy and a growing sense of caution. Every conversation felt like we were slowly breaking down the walls that had built up around us over the years. But at the same time, we were both afraid of what would happen once those walls came down. What would we find? Was there a place for us in each other's lives again? Or was it too late? I still couldn't fully shake the guilt I felt, the weight of my past choices. I had moved on with my life, married Lily, built a future with her. But now, in the quiet moments when I thought about Emma, I realized just how much I had buried, how much of my heart had stayed with her, even though I had never allowed myself to admit it. How could I have spent so many years pretending that I had moved on when the truth was that I had never really let her go? And how could I face Lily now, knowing the truth of what I still felt for Emma? One afternoon, I found myself standing at the edge of the park where Emma and I used to go on walks when we were in college. It was one of those quiet, overcast days, the kind where the world felt still and full of possibility. I hadn't told Lily where I was going. I wasn't sure what I was doing, really. It was just, I needed space. I needed to figure things out on my own, to face the truth of my feelings without anyone else's expectations weighing on me. As I walked through the park, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. The years spent apart from Emma, the pain of losing her, the guilt of moving on with someone else. And now, the uncertainty of what might happen next. What if I tried to rebuild what I had with Emma, only to find that too much time had passed? What if we couldn't get back to the place we once had, to the love we had built together? And then, as I walked past the old bench where Emma and I used to sit, I saw her. She was sitting there, looking out at the lake, her face turned toward the water. For a moment, I thought maybe I had imagined it, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But no, there she was, real and alive, sitting in front of me just like she had all those years ago. "Emma," I said softly, my heart racing in my chest. She turned, startled at first, but then she smiled. It was a small smile, but it was enough. I couldn't help but feel a rush of emotions flood over me, relief, longing, and that deep sense of connection that had never quite disappeared. "Hey," she said, her voice soft, almost tentative. "I wasn't sure you were coming. I didn't know if I should have asked to meet here, but I thought maybe." She trailed off, and for a moment we just stood there, looking at each other. "I wasn't sure either," I admitted, walking closer to her. "But I needed to see you. I needed to understand where we were." She nodded, her gaze falling to the ground for a moment before looking back up at me. "I know things aren't simple. I know I've put you in a difficult position. But Dylan, I've been thinking about this a lot, about us, about everything we've been through. And I realize I don't want to keep living in the past. I don't want to keep pretending like I can forget what we had." I felt a lump form in my throat. "I don't know how to move forward, Emma. I'm so lost in all of this. I've been trying to figure out what it means for me, for us, and I'm scared. I'm scared that I'll hurt the people I care about, and I'm scared that maybe we're just two different people now." She reached out, gently touching my arm, her fingers soft against my skin. "I'm scared too, but maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't have to have it all figured out right now. Maybe we just need to take it one step at a time. We don't have to rush this. We can let it happen, whatever it is." I looked at her, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes, the same vulnerability I had once loved so deeply. And I realized, in that moment, that maybe she was right. Maybe we couldn't go back to who we were before, but that didn't mean we couldn't find a new way forward together. "I don't have all the answers, Emma," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "but I think I'm ready to try." Her smile, this time, reached her eyes. Me too. As we stood there, side by side, I didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. Like maybe, just maybe, we had a chance to build something new, something real. And that was enough for me to start believing in us again. In life, it's important to confront the truth, no matter how painful it may be. Holding on to misunderstandings and unspoken hurt only keeps you trapped in the past. If something feels wrong, ask questions and seek clarity. Don't let assumptions dictate your decisions. Relationships, whether romantic or not, thrive on honesty and vulnerability. Don't be afraid to face the discomfort of confronting old wounds, because healing begins when you allow yourself to understand and move forward. And remember, sometimes the best thing you can do is take things one step at a time. There's no need to have all the answers at once.